The International Nuclear Event Scale was developed in 1990 as a communication tool for public safety, and in this video we are going to look at the most extreme levels on the scale and their accidents. Let's get it! We start in level 5, which is described as accidents with wider consequences. Back in 1987, a Brazil hospital forgot to properly dispose of the radiotherapy source, which contained almost 100 grams of radioactive material. It was found by thieves at an abandoned hospital site when a security guard didn't show up to work, and it was later sold at a scrapyard without knowing what it actually was. It eventually passed through a few more hands, and everyone who was around it seemed to fall ill. By the time everyone figured out what was going on, over 100,000 people had to get tested. 250 people were exposed, and 4 people passed due to severe exposure. Next we head to Canada, where their nuclear facility in Chalk River once assisted in the development of atomic bombs with the United States for World War II. In 1957, while working on developing sustainable nuclear power, some personnel missteps occurred which led to the partial meltdown of the nuclear core. After the reactor doubled in power multiple times, it was finally shut down. The main spread of radioactive material came with the leakage of water that was used to cool the fuel rods. Cleanup took months, along with hundreds of volunteers to limit their exposure, and surprisingly, no deaths were reported, nor was there a spread of radioactive material away from the site. The reactor was back up and operating 2 years later. 1979 is the year, and Pennsylvania, United States is the location, as the most significant accident in U.S. commercial nuclear power plant history. It was a mix of user and mechanical error that led to the overheating of the reactor, which led to the contamination of the building, as well as an explosion in another building. Radioactive material was measured away from the site, and lies were told to the media to try to cover up the event. No one was sure who to trust, as differing accounts of the events as well as the spread of radioactive material muddied the water. Some studies showed things such as rising infant mortality, thyroid cancer rates, and radioactive levels in the wildlife being abnormal, but nothing was ever declared by the government. The site had only been in use for a couple of months, but was damaged beyond repair and had to be deactivated. It took over 15 years for the cleanup to finish and cost $2 billion. Activists and locals fought against nuclear power, which led to the downfall of the use in the U.S., and over $100 million was paid out in legal settlements. The last Level 5 event occurred in the UK in 1957, and it was one of their worst nuclear events in their history. After the British helped with the discovery and invention of atomic weapons, the US forced the door closed and refused to reveal any more nuclear discoveries with the country, even though they should have. Fast forward almost a decade, and the event began at the military facility Windscale in England. After multiple attempts to cool the rising temperatures of the reactor, a uranium fuel cartridge exploded and caught fire. It took 4 days from the start to finally subdue the issue, and at one point 11 tons of uranium was burning at temperatures over 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The site has been blocked off since and is scheduled for decommission in 2037. The UK government attempted to cover up the accident, but news got out that radioactive material had possibly spread across Europe. It is believed that at least 200 deaths were the result of the accident. Now on to Level 6, which hosts one serious accident. The Soviet Union was competing against the US in a nuclear arms race, which led to the incident of 1957 at a military plutonium production and waste storage plant. It began after a malfunction in the cooling system of one of the waste containers, resulting in a huge explosion. Radioactive material was flung into the air, onto buildings, streets, cars, and people's clothes. The nuclear accident was also covered up by the controlling government. Over 70 metric tons of material spread across 20,000 square miles, including the homes of over 250,000 people. More than 20 villages, total 10,000 people, were evacuated, but some of those took over 2 years to happen. More than 50 deaths were confirmed from the incident, but the true statistics are impossible to find due to the intense cover-up and lack of recorded data. The top of the pyramid is for major accidents, and you might can guess the two that are here. The first one we talked briefly about recently, and it occurred in Japan in 2011. After After a horrifying earthquake and tsunami struck the country, their nuclear power plant was in trouble. After the tsunami waves caused damage and flooding to the plant, the backup generators supplying crucial power that cooled the reactors failed. This led to 3 reactor meltdowns, 3 hydrogen explosions, contaminated water leaking into the Pacific Ocean, and the evacuation of 150,000 people in the surrounding areas. This immediate evacuation is given credit to saving the lives of those individuals. Measurements of radioactive particles was done across the globe, and they even reached eastern Russia and the west coast of the United States. Only 1 death has been declared from radiation exposure, but data modeling predicts the number could be anywhere from 500 to 1,500. In this example, the deaths are not quite as important because almost 20,000 people were killed due to the earthquake and tsunami. But the release of the radioactive material was only around 15% of our number 1 spot, and the cleanup is not projected to be done for another 20 years. A grim image appears in the head of anyone who hears or thinks about the word Chernobyl, and it takes the cake on the list. The Soviet Union faced the worst nuclear event in their history in 1986, and happened during a safety test, no less. After failing to re-establish proper power, the heating and meltdown of the reactor began. An explosion erupted, destroying the entire building. A fire blazed the open air, and it would not be put out for over a week. Some workers who were there for cleanup received deadly levels of radiation in a matter of minutes, 30 of which died and 240 were hospitalized. A 30-mile evacuation began, and eventually more than 300,000 people were relocated, including those in the nearby town that was permanently closed. This is unfortunately another one where getting an accurate count of deaths is hard, but it was proven that childhood thyroid cancer deaths increased, and some estimates show anywhere from 5,000 to 25,000 deaths will be the result of this incident. The Soviet government tried their best to cover up the situation, but after high radiation levels were detected at a nuclear facility over 600 miles away in Sweden, the public and the world were notified. Both design and user error led to the disaster, which caused almost 40,000 square miles in multiple countries to be highly contaminated. The total cleanup is not expected to be complete until 2065, which is 80 years after the event. And now you know. I hope you enjoyed the video, and now go enjoy your day. Please feel free to comment some feedback, or give a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. I'll see you next time.